The Hells Angels biker found the little girl locked in a storage unit, and his violent rescue exposed a crime ring. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The night was cold and damp, a chilling wind sweeping through the empty streets of the industrial district. The headlights of a Harley-Davidson sliced through the darkness, the engine's deep growl reverberating in the quiet air. Jake Reaper Morrison, a grizzled Hells Angels biker, was on a routine ride after a long day of repairs at the garage. The road was mostly empty, the eerie silence of the area punctuated only by the hum of his bike and the occasional flicker of streetlights. As he turned a corner, he saw something strange ahead. There, hidden behind a row of old, abandoned storage units, was a faint light flickering. Intrigued, he slowed down, instinctively gripping the handlebars tighter. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to see any activity. The storage units were known for being abandoned, and most of the neighborhood had turned into a no-man's land after dark. But something felt off. As he crept closer, the light flickered again, this time followed by a soft, desperate cry. It was faint, but clear enough to catch Jake's attention. His heart rate quickened. No one in their right mind would be out here at this hour, let alone in such a dangerous, desolate place. He killed the engine, dismounted from his bike, and began walking toward the sound. The night was quiet again, except for the shuffling of his boots against the gravel. He reached the row of storage units, the low, rusted doors barely holding on to their hinges. As he got closer, the faint cry grew louder. It was a child. He froze, his instincts kicking in. No one else was around. The noise was too quiet to be a joke or a prank. It was real. A girl, scared and alone. Jake's hand tightened into a fist. He stepped forward cautiously, his boots crunching against the gravel as he approached the source of the noise. And then he saw her. A small girl, no older than 7 or 8, curled up in a corner of one of the units. Her face was streaked with dirt, her clothes torn, and her eyes wide with fear. She was locked in, shivering and looking at him with a mixture of confusion and fear. For a moment, Jake stood frozen in place. She was so small, so fragile. And here she was, trapped in this grim, forgotten corner of the world. His heart pounded in his chest as he took in her condition. The girl looked up at him, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Please, don't hurt me. I can't move." His breath caught in his throat. The vulnerability in her voice hit him like a punch to the gut. He didn't know who had done this to her, but the sight of this innocent child, locked away like she was nothing more than a piece of discarded property, stirred something deep within him. Without another thought, he rushed forward, tearing at the rusty lock on the storage unit door with his bare hands. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open with a loud groan. The girl flinched at the noise, her fear escalating. Jake stepped inside, kneeling in front of her, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's all right, kid. You're safe now," he said, his voice rough but gentle. She stared at him, her wide eyes searching his face for any sign of danger. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the tension thick in the air. Then, slowly, the girl spoke again, her voice barely audible. They put me here. They said I was bad." Jake's stomach turned. Who would do this to a child? The thought of it made his blood boil, but he kept his composure, knowing that his next actions could either reassure her or send her into a panic. "You're not bad. You're just a kid who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let's get you out of here, okay?" As he gently helped her to her feet, he noticed the bruises on her arms, the cuts on her face. This wasn't just neglect. This was cruelty. Jake's protective instincts flared up. He couldn't leave her here. Not like this. He helped her out of the storage unit, holding her small hand in his as he guided her away from the scene. The night felt colder now, the weight of what he had just discovered settling on his shoulders. There was more to this than a simple case of a kidnapped child. He had to find out who did this and make sure they never hurt anyone again. But as they walked toward his bike, something didn't feel right. The hairs on the back of Jake's neck stood up. He wasn't alone, and whoever had done this wasn't far behind. I stood beside my Harley, the cold wind cutting through the air, my breath visible in the dim light. The girl, still trembling, was huddled in front of me. I kept a protective eye on her, but something deep inside told me this wasn't just a random kidnapping. There was more to this, something far more dangerous. The storage unit was only the beginning. I had to get her somewhere safe, somewhere that would give us a chance to figure out who did this and why. My mind was already racing with possibilities. I had barely moved when I felt it, a presence in the air. Someone was watching us. I turned quickly, scanning the empty street, but saw nothing. Still, I knew better than to ignore my instincts. "Stay close," I said to the girl, keeping my voice low, steady, but full of urgency. She nodded, clutching my jacket tighter as we walked to my bike. I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps behind us. A glance over my shoulder confirmed it. Shadows were moving, approaching fast. They were closing in on us. Without warning, I grabbed her by the arm and pushed her toward the bike. "Get on now," I said, voice sharp. She hesitated, fear in her eyes, but the urgency in my tone made her act quickly. I climbed on first, starting the engine, and she climbed on behind me, clutching me tight. As soon as she was settled, I hit the throttle and sped off into the night. The wind whipped through my hair, but the feeling of danger in the air only grew. I was no stranger to violence, to danger, to running from enemies I had made in the past. But this felt different. Whoever was behind this, whoever had put that girl in that storage unit, wasn't going to let us leave easily. The city lights blurred as I pushed the bike harder, the streets of this forgotten neighborhood stretching out behind us like a shadow chasing our every move. I could feel the presence of the pursuers now, the low hum of their engines in the distance. I knew they were behind us, and I had no intention of letting them catch up. But where could I go? What could I do to shake them off? I pushed through the thought. I had one place to go, my old friend, someone I trusted, who owed me one. It was the only place I knew that could give us shelter. The bike roared as I took a sharp turn, the tires screeching against the pavement as we sped toward the outskirts of town. We had to lose them. We had to get somewhere safe. The girl clung to me, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. I could tell she didn't fully understand the danger yet, but I could see it in her face. She knew enough. She had been through too much to be naive. My heart went out to her, but I couldn't afford to stop now. I had to keep her safe. As I weaved through the streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just running from some street thugs. This felt organized, deliberate. I had been part of things like this once, years ago. The pieces were starting to click into place. Whatever had been happening with that storage unit, it was just a part of something much bigger. A crime ring. The idea hit me like a sledgehammer. A crime ring. And I had just stumbled right into the middle of it. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the road ahead. But the sound of engines behind us grew louder. They were gaining on us. It wasn't just one vehicle anymore. They had reinforcements. The tension in my chest tightened as I looked ahead. We were nearly there. Just a few more blocks, and we would be able to take a turn that would put us out of sight. But the engine sounds were too close. I had no choice. I had to make a decision. Without warning, I swerved, pulling into an alleyway, slamming on the brakes just as a car roared past. I cursed under my breath, but I had to act fast. I turned off the engine and looked at the girl. "Stay quiet," I whispered. "Stay still." Her eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded. We sat there, motionless, as the sounds of the engines faded away. After what seemed like forever, I slowly exhaled. They were gone. For now. I started the bike again, more carefully this time, and continued toward the safe house. My mind kept racing, though. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Whoever had put that girl in that storage unit, whoever was behind this, was still out there. And they were going to come for us. The girl needed to know what was going on, but I couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. Not until we were somewhere safe. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't letting her out of my sight until I knew who was behind this and what they wanted. I could feel my heart pounding as I maneuvered the bike down the dark alleyway, the girl still gripping me tightly, her small hands trembling against my leather jacket. We had barely escaped from the men chasing us, but I knew this was just the beginning. Whoever was after us wouldn't give up that easily. I took a quick glance behind us, making sure we weren't being followed, before pulling out onto the main road. The streets were eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel like something dangerous was just waiting to happen. The girl's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear as she glanced around, still trying to process everything. I couldn't blame her. I knew what it was like to be in that kind of panic, not knowing who to trust or where to turn. I didn't want to scare her further, but I had to get answers, and I needed to get her somewhere safe. The ride to my friend's place felt like it took forever, the streets becoming more deserted the further we went. My mind raced with questions. Who had put that girl in that storage unit? And why had they left her there? It didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation did. The only thing that was clear to me was that we were caught in the middle of something much bigger than just a random kidnapping. As I approached the old warehouse where my friend lived, I saw the familiar lights flickering in the distance. It was the kind of place that felt like a refuge for people like me, outsiders, rebels, people who didn't belong anywhere else. I pulled up to the entrance and parked the bike. "We're safe here for now," I said softly to the girl, trying to reassure her as I dismounted. She followed my lead, stepping off the bike shakily, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The warehouse was quiet, almost abandoned, but I knew it was secure. I had spent enough time here to know that my old friend would be able to help us, at least for the night. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent night. A few moments later, the door creaked open, and there stood my old friend, a burly guy with a thick beard and tattoos covering his arms. "Jake, what the hell? What's going on?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "We've got company," I said, looking over my shoulder to make sure we weren't being followed. "A little girl's been locked in a storage unit. Someone's after her, and we need to figure out who before they come looking for her again." My friend's eyes widened as he glanced at the girl standing behind me. She looked so out of place in this rough, gritty environment, her innocence contrasting with everything around her. "What the hell happened?" he muttered under his breath as he stepped aside to let us in. I helped the girl inside, and my friend closed the door behind us. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, filled with old motorcycle parts and tools scattered across the concrete floor. It was a place I had spent countless nights working, a place where I could escape from everything. My friend led us to a back room, where he motioned for us to sit down. "You're safe here. We'll figure this out," he said, his tone serious. I could see the concern in his eyes, but I also knew he understood the kind of danger we were facing. "We can't stay here long," I said. "Whoever is after her will come looking, and we need to know who's behind this." My friend nodded, his expression darkening. "You're right. I'll make a few calls. We'll get to the bottom of this." As he walked off to make his calls, I turned to the girl. She was sitting on a worn couch, hugging her knees to her chest, her eyes darting around the room nervously. I could tell she was exhausted, scared, and confused. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside her. "You're safe now. We're going to get you home." She didn't say anything, but I could see her eyes flicker up to meet mine, and for the first time since I found her, she looked a little less afraid. "Do you know who did this to you?" I asked, my voice gentle. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know. I was with my mom, and then I woke up in that place. There were men. They didn't want me to leave." Her voice cracked as she spoke, and I could see the pain in her eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find out who did this. I promise." Just then, my friend came back into the room, his face grim. "I've got some leads," he said, his voice low. "But we need to move fast. Whoever is behind this isn't messing around. They've got their eyes on you now, and it won't be long before they come looking." I stood up, my jaw tightening with anger. "Then we'll make sure they don't get to her first." The girl looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. But this time, there was something else there too. A glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore, and we weren't going to let her fall through the cracks. Whatever these men were planning, whatever crime ring was lurking behind this, we were going to take it down. And we were going to start by protecting her. We couldn't let the darkness win. I sat down across from my old friend, watching him closely as he made his call. The room was filled with the low hum of his voice, his tone serious, as he spoke to someone on the other end of the line. I couldn't hear the words, but I could guess what he was saying. It was clear now that we were in deeper than I had originally thought. The girl, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, sat on the couch, staring off into space. I could see the fear in her eyes, but I could also see the exhaustion, mentally and physically. She was so small, yet had already been through so much. The weight of it all was too much for anyone to bear, let alone a child. My old friend hung up the phone and looked at me, his expression grim. "We've got some leads. There's a ring operating out of the city, dealing with stolen children. It's bigger than I thought," he said, his voice heavy. But it gets worse. They've got people in the police, in the system. This isn't just some street thugs. I nodded slowly. It made sense now. The way they had grabbed her, the way she had been hidden away. It wasn't random. Someone had planned this. Someone with power. How do we get to them? I asked, my voice low but firm. My old friend leaned in closer, his eyes locked onto mine. We start by keeping her safe. We need to get her out of here before they find us. And we need to move fast. He paused, then added, I've got a place in the woods, a safe house. We can hide out there for a while. No one knows about it. I glanced over at the girl. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of trust in them, but it was clear she didn't fully understand what was happening. She only knew she was being moved again, kept in hiding. She probably wondered if she was safe here, too. I couldn't blame her. This world was foreign to her, and she had already been let down by so many people. But I wasn't going to let that happen again. Let's go, I said, standing up. Get her ready. My friend nodded and moved toward the back room to prepare things. As he moved, I took a deep breath, glancing out the window. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. I had always been the one to face danger head-on. I was no stranger to violence, to the ugliness of the world. But this was different. A child. I clenched my fists at the thought. Whoever was behind this would regret what they had done. No one was going to hurt her again. You all right? My friend asked, breaking me from my thoughts. I looked over at him and nodded. I'll be fine. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. The way things were unfolding, it felt like this was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. And the deeper we went, the darker it would get. I had been in situations like this before. It wasn't my first time going up against an enemy who knew how to cover their tracks. But this time, I had a child to protect. A child who had already been through more than any kid should ever face. I wasn't just doing this for myself anymore. I wasn't just protecting someone I barely knew. This was personal. The girl deserved a chance at a life without fear, without the scars that would haunt her forever. As we walked out the door, I looked back at the room one last time, my mind racing with the possibilities. The safe house was our only hope. Once we were there, we could regroup, plan our next move. We needed to find out who was running this operation, and we needed to make sure they paid for what they had done. We climbed onto the bike, the girl holding on tight behind me as we sped off into the night. The road ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't going to stop until she was safe. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, but I didn't care. I had a job to do, and nothing, was going to get in my way. The girl's life depended on it. I could feel the tension in the air as we made our way through the winding roads leading to the safe house. The girl, still gripping me tightly, had calmed down a little, but I could tell she was still on edge. Her eyes kept darting around, constantly alert, as if waiting for something to happen. It was clear she didn't trust anyone, and I didn't blame her. I had been there once. The world had a way of breaking you down until you couldn't tell who was good and who was bad. The headlights of my Harley cut through the darkness, the sound of the engine echoing in the quiet night. My old friend had warned me that we didn't have much time. Whoever was behind this would be looking for the girl soon, and we couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. I gripped the throttle a little tighter, pushing the bike faster. The road ahead was empty, and I could feel the weight of what was coming. The safe house wasn't far now. It was an old cabin in the woods, far away from any prying eyes. It wasn't much, but it would give us the time we needed to figure out our next move. My mind kept racing with possibilities. What if we didn't make it in time? What if they were already onto us? I couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. I had a job to do, and that job was keeping her safe. As we pulled up to the cabin, I slowed the bike and came to a stop in front of the small, weathered structure. It looked abandoned, just like the rest of the area around it, but I knew it was secure. My old friend had set it up years ago, and I trusted him. We're here, I said, turning to look at the girl. She looked up at the cabin, her face full of uncertainty. This is the safest place we have for now, I reassured her. You'll be all right here. She didn't respond, but I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She was tired, scared, and confused, but she was starting to trust me. I helped her off the bike and led her inside the cabin. The interior was dimly lit, with old furniture scattered around. It wasn't much, but it was better than the storage unit or the streets. I'm going to get some supplies, I told her. Stay here and lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone unless I say so, all right? She nodded, her face still pale, but there was a hint of understanding now. I stepped outside, my boots crunching on the gravel as I walked to the small shed behind the cabin. It was stocked with tools and equipment I might need. My mind was already planning our next move. We needed to find out who was behind this. I couldn't let it go. Whoever had kidnapped her, whoever had put her in that storage unit, needed to pay. But I wasn't just going to sit here and wait for them to make the next move. No, I needed to get ahead of them. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I opened the shed door, scanning the contents quickly. The shelves were filled with old supplies, most of it used for repairs and maintenance. I grabbed a few things, some food, a first aid kit, and a flashlight, and made my way back to the cabin. The night felt heavier now, the silence around me almost suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was waiting for us just beyond the trees. I pushed the thought aside and returned to the cabin. As I walked in, I noticed the girl hadn't moved. She was sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes distant. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Maybe she was starting to believe that we were going to get through this. We're not safe yet, I said, setting the supplies down on the table. But we've got time. I'm going to figure this out, I promise. She didn't speak, but I could see she was listening. I sat down across from her, my mind still racing. We couldn't stay here forever, but it would have to do for now. We needed to find out who was behind this, and we needed to stop them before they could do anything else. But first, I needed to get her to trust me completely. She had been through too much already, and I couldn't risk losing her now. I had to be her protector. For now, that was the only thing that mattered. I leaned forward, my voice softer this time. I know you're scared, but you're not alone anymore. I'm going to keep you safe, no matter what. Do you understand? She looked at me for a moment, and then, to my surprise, she nodded. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. She trusted me, and that was the first step. I got up and moved toward the door, checking the locks. It wasn't much, but it was all we had for now. The storm outside had picked up, the wind howling as it battered against the cabin. I could feel the tension in my body, my senses heightened. Whoever was after her would come eventually. And when they did, we would be ready. I looked back at the girl, who was now lying down on the couch, her eyes closed. Get some rest, I said quietly. We've got a long road ahead of us. I walked over to the window and peered out into the storm. The trees were swaying in the wind, and I could hear the faint sound of footsteps crunching in the snow. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But we had one advantage, time, and we weren't going to waste it. I sat by the small fire in the corner of the cabin, staring into the flickering flames. The wind howled outside, the storm growing fiercer by the minute. I hadn't expected to feel this kind of pressure again, this constant weight on my chest. But here I was, trying to keep a promise I had made to myself. Protect her, no matter what. I glanced over at the girl. She had finally fallen asleep on the couch, her small frame curled up in the thick blanket I had found for her. Her breathing was steady now, but I could see the faint traces of fear still lingering on her face. She had been through hell, and I was going to make sure she never had to go through it again. My friend's voice echoed in my mind as I replayed the conversation we'd had earlier. This isn't just some street gang, Jake. This is bigger. They've got connections everywhere. We need to be careful. No mistakes. I rubbed my face with both hands, my fingers digging into my skin as I thought about the girl's future. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that. The crime ring we were up against was well organized, far-reaching. We needed to figure out who was behind it all, and how far their reach truly went. But there was no way we could do that without getting noticed. I couldn't hide her forever. But for now, I had to make sure she was safe. My eyes flickered back to the girl, her tiny hand clutching the blanket as if afraid someone might come and take her away again. She had been through too much. I stood up and walked over to the small window, peering out into the storm. The snow was coming down hard now, the wind making it impossible to see much beyond the trees. I had to admit it. I didn't know what I was up against, but I knew one thing. They weren't going to stop. Whoever these people were, they had control. They had power, and they wouldn't rest until they had what they wanted. My mind raced as I thought about our next move. We couldn't stay here forever. The safe house was good for now, but it wouldn't keep us hidden for long. They would find us, just like they found her. It was just a matter of time. As I stood there, Staring into the whiteout of the storm, I made a decision. We had to get ahead of them. We couldn't let them dictate the pace anymore. We had to fight back, figure out who was behind this, and take them down before they had a chance to hurt anyone else. I looked back at the girl, still asleep on the couch. She was trusting me now. I couldn't let her down. I wouldn't. The cabin was quiet, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. I glanced around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings. This was where I had been hiding for years, a place where no one could find me. But now, it wasn't just me. I had someone else to protect. I couldn't let her feel like she was alone in this world. I had to make sure she knew that there was a way out. She had to believe that things could get better. I sat back down, taking a deep breath. The room felt heavy with silence, but in the stillness, I began to plan. I needed to get to the bottom of this. Whoever was behind this was dangerous, and I needed to know everything about them. I wasn't going to sit back and let them walk all over me, and I certainly wasn't going to let them hurt anyone else. As I thought about the road ahead, I knew that it wouldn't be easy. There would be danger. There would be enemies. But I wasn't afraid. I had lived through worse. And now, I had someone worth fighting for. The girl's life wasn't the only one at stake here. This was bigger than just us. This was about stopping a crime ring that had destroyed lives, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I stood up, my muscles stiff from sitting too long, and walked over to the door. The storm outside was still fierce, but I wasn't afraid of it. I had faced worse storms before. I knew what I had to do. It was time to take action. The girl stirred on the couch, and I looked back at her one last time before stepping outside into the cold. The night air bit at my skin as I pulled the door closed behind me, my mind set on the task ahead. This was just the beginning. We were going to find these people, and we were going to make them pay. No more running. It was time to fight back. I could feel the tension building inside the cabin as I paced back and forth, every corner of the room a reminder of the weight pressing down on us. My mind was racing, the plan from earlier swirling in my thoughts, but still, there was no concrete way forward. We couldn't stay here long. The storm outside was the least of our problems. I knew that once the people who were after the girl realized we were in hiding, they would stop at nothing to find us. I needed to get answers. Fast. But where did I start? I glanced back at the girl, still lying on the couch, her eyes closed, lost in a fitful sleep. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. I promised to protect her, but I had no idea what we were truly up against. I couldn't afford to fail her. I stepped over to the window and peeked through the blinds. The snow was still coming down in thick sheets, but there was something unsettling about the way the shadows in the distance moved. Someone was out there, someone who didn't belong. I felt it in my gut. This wasn't just a random patrol or another storm-weary traveler. No, these were the people we were running from. I turned away from the window, my mind made up. It was time to find answers. I moved toward the back of the cabin, grabbing the bag I had prepared earlier. It wasn't much, but it would do for now. A few supplies, a couple of old maps, and the phone. The phone. I still had that burner. I hadn't used it since my last conversation with my friend, but now it was time to reach out again. I knew I couldn't trust anyone else. Not yet, but I needed to know who was behind this. I needed to know who was pulling the strings. I pulled the phone from my pocket, flicking it on, and dialed the number. The line rang for what seemed like forever before it was picked up. Jake, my friend's voice came through, low and urgent. What's the situation? I wasted no time. They're out there, I said, glancing over my shoulder at the girl. They know we're here. It's only a matter of time before they come for us. I need everything you've got on them. Now. There was a brief pause before my friend spoke again. I've been digging, Jake. This isn't just some petty crime ring. These people, whoever they are, have connections. They're everywhere. And the girl you're protecting? She's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm not sure how far this goes, but I know one thing. They don't stop until they get what they want. My friend's words hit hard, but it was the truth I had been avoiding. These people were ruthless, and they had no intention of letting the girl go. I need to know everything you can find, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Every detail. We don't have much time. I'm on it, my friend replied. But you need to stay low, Jake. I'm sending someone to help, but you need to be careful. Trust no one. I ended the call, a sick feeling settling in my stomach. This was bigger than I thought. I walked back to the girl, who was now sitting up, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She must have sensed the change in the air. I knelt down in front of her, my voice soft. Hey, I said gently, we're going to figure this out. I know you're scared, but we're not going to let them get to you. We're going to stop them. She nodded slightly, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't fully understand what was going on, but she knew enough to be terrified. I reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to offer some comfort, though I wasn't sure I believed the words myself. I'm not going to let them hurt you. I promised, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around me. The silence between us was thick with tension. I stood up and moved toward the door, opening it just enough to peer out into the storm. The snow was still falling heavily, but I knew that wouldn't stop whoever was coming for us. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer. There was no time to waste. I turned back to the girl, taking a deep breath. I'm going to take a look outside, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Stay here. Keep the door locked. Don't open it for anyone unless I say so, all right? She looked at me, her eyes wide, and nodded, though I could see the fear still lingering. I stepped outside, my boots crunching in the snow, the cold air biting at my skin. The world was a blur of white, but my eyes scanned the perimeter, looking for any signs of movement. The wind howled, making it almost impossible to hear anything, but I trusted my instincts. They were coming, and they would be ready. I didn't have much time. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. I had to do whatever it took to keep the girl safe, and I wasn't going to let anyone get in my way. I stepped out into the snow, my boots crunching with each step as I scanned the dark landscape. The wind howled through the trees, and the snow was thick, swirling in the cold air. The storm had turned into something more dangerous, but I didn't have time to worry about the weather. I had a job to do. The girl was safe, for now, but I knew it wouldn't last long. Whoever was behind this was closing in. I had to be ready. I checked the perimeter, my eyes scanning the surroundings for any movement. The cabin was tucked away, hidden from the main road, but I could still feel that nagging sense of being watched. My instincts were screaming at me to stay alert, to trust no one. I moved closer to the trees, keeping to the shadows. There was no sign of movement, but I wasn't taking any chances. I didn't hear a thing, just the roar of the wind and the occasional creak of the trees. It was too quiet. Almost too quiet. I took a few more steps, my body tense, my mind racing. Who was after us? And how did they know where we were? The girl had been in that storage unit, alone and terrified. The way she looked at me, like she didn't know if she could trust anyone, hit me hard. I wasn't going to fail her. Not after everything she'd been through. I pulled out my phone and dialed my old friend. It rang a few times before he picked up. Jake, he said, his voice low. What's the situation? I think they know we're here, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I can feel it. There's something off about the whole situation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What do you need? He asked. I need you to keep digging. We don't have much time. Whoever is behind this isn't playing around. They've got people everywhere. I could hear him breathing on the other end, the sound of paper rustling. All right, he said, I'm on it. But you need to be careful. They have connections. This isn't just some street gang. I know, I said, gripping the phone tightly. Just keep me updated. I hung up, tucking the phone back into my jacket pocket. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let my guard down. Not now. I turned back toward the cabin, moving quickly but silently. I couldn't afford to waste any time. When I got inside, the girl was still where I had left her, sitting on the couch, her eyes wide with fear. Everything all right? She asked, her voice shaky. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Yeah, just making sure we're good. We'll be safe here for a while, but we need to stay quiet. No one can know where we are. She nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. Are they going to come for me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat down beside her, my expression softening. I won't let them, I said firmly. I promise you, no one is going to hurt you again. She looked at me, her eyes full of doubt, but there was something else there too. A flicker of trust. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. I had to make sure that trust was not misplaced. I needed to protect her, and I wasn't going to stop until I had found out who was behind this and taken them down. But for now, we had to stay hidden. The storm outside had picked up, the wind rattling the windows. The world felt small and enclosed, but I knew we couldn't stay here forever. We needed a plan. I needed to find out where the girl came from, who had taken her, and why. But most of all, I needed to make sure that whatever happened, She wasn't going to end up back in the hands of the people who had hurt her. As I sat there in the quiet cabin, with the girl beside me, I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I wasn't going to let her slip away again. I wasn't going to fail her. But the clock was ticking, and I knew the people we were up against wouldn't stop. The storm raged outside, but it was nothing compared to what was coming for us. And when it hit, we needed to be ready. I paced back and forth in the dimly lit cabin, the storm outside howling louder by the minute. The weight of the situation pressed on me, but I couldn't show it. The girl was still in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, her small form curled up on the couch. Her eyes followed me, tracking every movement, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. We both knew what was at stake. I stopped by the window again, peering through the blinds into the thickening snow. The landscape outside was bleak, the trees bending under the force of the wind. But it wasn't the storm that had my attention. I could feel them getting closer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, the unease creeping back in. Whoever was after us, whoever had hurt her, was coming. I could feel it in my gut. The phone in my pocket buzzed, breaking the silence. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out and saw my friend's number on the screen. I answered immediately. "Jake," he said, his voice steady but serious. "I've got news." "What's going on?" I asked, my eyes still scanning the dark outside. "The people behind this. They're organized. This is bigger than I thought. They've got people in places you wouldn't believe, Jake. And they're making moves. You're not safe there. You need to leave." I felt my chest tighten at his words. "I can't leave. Not yet. The girl's still here." "Jake, you don't understand. This isn't just some small-time operation. These people, they're powerful. If they catch wind of where you are, it's over. You need to get her out of there, and you need to do it fast." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The girl, the innocent child who had been thrown into the middle of this, was in even more danger than I realized. "I won't let them get to her," I said firmly, gripping the phone tighter. "We're not going anywhere until I know who's behind this." My friend sighed, clearly frustrated. "I get it, Jake. I really do. But you're not invincible. These people have the resources to find you. And when they do, they won't hesitate to take her." I stood there in silence for a moment, trying to process what he was saying. But there was no time to think about it. The storm outside wasn't the only thing closing in. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice low. "I'll keep digging. But you need to make sure you're ready. If they come for you, you can't afford to hesitate. Get her out of there, Jake. And don't look back." I ended the call and stood still, the weight of my friend's words sinking in. The fear, the danger, it was all real. It wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about survival. For both of us. I turned around, my gaze falling on the girl. She was looking up at me now, her eyes wide with that same mix of fear and confusion I had seen when I first found her. I walked over to her, crouching down to her level. "Hey," I said softly, "I need you to listen to me. Things are about to get dangerous. But I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at me told me she understood. She trusted me now, and I wasn't going to let her down. "We need to move, kid," I said, standing up. "Grab your things. We're leaving." She nodded slowly, her small hands trembling as she gathered her things. I could feel the urgency building in my chest. Time was running out. I could hear the sound of distant engines now, the unmistakable hum of motorcycles cutting through the storm. The people after us were getting closer. I moved to the door, checking the locks again. Everything was secure, but I knew it wouldn't be for long. I looked at the girl one last time, making sure she was ready. "Stay close to me. Don't make a sound, and don't open the door unless I tell you. We need to move fast." She nodded again, her small body shaking as she held tightly to the blanket wrapped around her. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too. A glimmer of hope. "Let's go," I said, opening the door and stepping out into the cold night. The storm hit us like a wall of ice, but we pushed forward, moving quickly through the snow. My bike was parked just outside, ready to take us to the next place, wherever that was. The sound of motorcycles grew louder, and I knew we didn't have much time before they found us. I got the girl onto the bike first, making sure she was secure behind me. I could feel her hands gripping me tightly as I started the engine. We were leaving everything behind. The storm, the cabin, the safety I had hoped for. But that wasn't our reality anymore. As I sped off into the night, I kept my eyes on the road, my mind already working on the next steps. We couldn't stop until we knew who was after us, and why. But there was one thing I was sure of: we weren't going down without a fight. And whoever was hunting us was going to regret ever crossing our path. I pushed the throttle harder, my fingers numb against the cold handlebar as the engine roared through the night. The wind whipped around us, cutting into my face, but I kept my focus straight ahead. I could feel the girl's arms tightening around my waist, her grip almost desperate, as we sped down the deserted road. The storm had picked up, snow swirling in the air, making it nearly impossible to see anything beyond a few feet. The roads were slick, treacherous, but that was the least of our concerns. We were running from people who wouldn't hesitate to hunt us down. The motorcycles I'd heard earlier were getting closer, their engines cutting through the wind like an approaching storm. They were behind us, no doubt about it. They had found us. My heart raced as I pushed the bike faster, my eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. The headlights from the pursuing bikes were getting brighter, closing in on us fast. We couldn't outrun them, not on this road. I needed to think. I had to get us out of this, but I knew our time was running out. Hold on tight. I yelled over my shoulder to the girl. Her grip tightened, but she didn't say anything. She was scared, I could feel it, but there was something else too. Something stronger than fear. She had to trust me, and right now, I had no choice but to put my faith in the bike and the road. The sound of the engines behind us was growing louder, the gap between us closing fast. My mind raced, calculating our next move. I had to find somewhere to lose them, a way to disappear. The bike ahead was gaining on us. Whoever they were skilled. They knew how to chase, how to push someone to the edge. I turned sharply onto a smaller road, hoping it would give us some cover. The girl yelped as we made the turn, her body jerking with the sudden change in direction. I didn't wait for her to get her balance. The rearview mirror showed them still on our tail, but we had to take the chance. The road was narrow, but it was our best shot. As we sped down the winding path, the trees lined the road like shadows, blocking out the faint light from the moon. We had a moment, just a sliver of time, before they caught up. But would it be enough? I didn't know. I had to get creative. My eyes searched the area, scanning for anything that could give us a break. That's when I saw it. A large abandoned barn, half hidden behind a thicket of trees. The doors were open, a perfect spot for a quick hideout. I didn't waste a second. I swerved sharply toward the barn, tires screeching as the bike slid into the dirt patch before the entrance. I slammed the brakes and jumped off, grabbing the girl's hand and pulling her with me. Inside. Now, I hissed, urgency in my voice. She didn't hesitate, following me as we ducked into the barn. We moved quickly, our steps muffled by the thick snow on the ground. Inside, the barn was dark, the air thick with the scent of hay and old wood. It was abandoned, quiet, but it would do for now. I pulled the girl behind a stack of wooden crates and crouched low, listening. The motorcycles had stopped at the edge of the barn, their engines cutting off one by one. I could hear them talking, voices low, but they were close. Too close. They must have turned off the road, one of them said. Let's check the barn. I clenched my jaw, the anger bubbling up inside me. They were getting too close. We couldn't stay here long. The girl looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She was trembling. I crouched down beside her and took her hand, trying to give her some comfort. It's going to be okay, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. She looked at me with those big, frightened eyes and nodded, though her fear was palpable. I couldn't let them hurt her. I wouldn't. The sound of footsteps grew louder as they moved toward the barn entrance. I knew we didn't have much time. I needed to get us out of here before they found us. There was no other option. I stood up slowly, my hand gripping the handle of my gun, ready for whatever was coming next. The girl stayed close, her small hand clutching mine as we moved further into the shadows of the barn. I could hear the men's voices growing louder, their boots crunching in the snow outside. They're here, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. I motioned for the girl to stay quiet. We had to be patient. As they stepped inside the barn, I took a deep breath. I wasn't going down without a fight, and I wasn't going to let them take her. Stay behind me, I said quietly. The men were closing in, and I had to be ready. I wasn't sure how many of them there were, but I knew this wasn't going to end peacefully. It never did. The question was, how far? Were they willing to go to get her? How far would I go to stop them? I could hear the men's voices now, muffled through the old wooden walls of the barn. They were getting closer, their footsteps crunching in the snow just outside. I crouched lower, pulling the girl behind a stack of hay bales, my hand gripping her small wrist as I kept her close. Her heart was racing in her chest, and I could feel her trembling. I tried to calm her with a soft whisper. "Stay quiet, stay still. We'll get through this." She nodded, her wide eyes full of fear, but she didn't say anything. The silence was deafening as I watched the shadows move outside, creeping closer to the barn entrance. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my senses heightened. I had done this before, stayed silent, stayed hidden, but this time, it was different. This time, there was a child to protect. I had no intention of letting them take her. The voices grew louder as the men stepped inside the barn. I pressed myself against the cold, wooden wall, my breath shallow as I listened to their every move. They were close now, just a few feet away. I held my breath, waiting for the perfect moment. "She has to be here," one of them said, his voice gruff. I saw the tracks in the snow. She didn't go far. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized they were talking about the girl. They were already on our trail, and they wouldn't stop until they found her. I had to think fast. I couldn't let them get any closer. I looked around the barn, searching for anything that could give us an edge. My eyes landed on a broken-down tractor in the corner, its rusted frame almost hidden by stacks of old crates. It wasn't much, but it could be our escape route. I gently pulled the girl to her feet and motioned for her to follow me. We moved slowly, carefully, trying not to make a sound. I could hear the men talking, their voices drifting closer, and I knew we didn't have much time. The barn was big, but we were cornered. There was no way out unless I acted quickly. I led the girl toward the tractor, crouching low to the ground as I moved. My pulse was racing now, my mind a blur of calculations. The men were just a few steps away from the hay bales, and I knew if they spotted us, it was over. The girl's hand gripped mine tighter, and I could feel her fear seeping through her trembling fingers. I stopped for a moment, crouching behind the tractor, trying to steady my breathing. We had one shot at this. I waited, listening intently as the men continued to search the barn. My eyes flicked to the exit, but it was too far away. The snow was thick outside, and the road would be treacherous. There was no guarantee we could outrun them. The barn door was the only way out, and it was slowly creaking open as they approached. I could see their silhouettes now, moving across the barn, searching. I knew they would be in the main area of the barn in just a few seconds. I didn't have a choice. I grabbed the girl's hand and motioned for her to stay close. "Follow me, and don't make a sound," I whispered. With every ounce of my strength, I pulled her toward the far corner of the barn, staying close to the shadows. The sound of the men's boots grew louder, but I focused on the task at hand. We had to get to the door without being seen. We were almost there, just a few feet from the back exit. My heart raced as I heard one of the men shout, "Where are they?" I froze. My blood ran cold as I realized they had spotted something. I turned to the girl, pushing her toward the door. "Go," I hissed. She ran ahead, her small feet barely making a sound as she bolted toward the exit. I followed right behind her, the door creaking open as we slipped out into the cold night. We were outside now, the wind cutting through the air as I scanned the area. The snow had started to fall again, heavier this time, but I didn't care. We had a chance. The men were still inside, their voices growing faint, but I could hear them moving, looking for us. I grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her with me, heading toward the trees, where the snow had piled high and the cover was thick. I could hear the engines of motorcycles in the distance now. They were coming. We didn't have much time. I had to get us out of here, but the woods were our only shot. "Keep moving," I urged, my voice low but firm. We ran, our steps muffled by the thick snow, the cold air biting at our skin. I kept glancing over my shoulder, watching for any sign of the men. The road ahead was clear, but the danger was still close. I wasn't sure how long we could keep this up. My eyes scanned the area, looking for a place to hide, something that could give us a little more time. But the deeper we went into the woods, the more I realized how exposed we were. There was nowhere to hide in the open, and the motorcycles would catch up to us soon. I had to make a decision. There was a small cabin a mile or so ahead. I had passed it before, a place I knew had a few supplies. It wasn't much, but it was something. "There's a cabin up ahead," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to make it there before they catch up. Do you understand?" The girl nodded, her face pale but determined. Let's go, I said, gripping her hand as we picked up the pace. We had to outrun them. We had to make it there before it was too late. I could feel the snow biting into my skin as we made our way through the woods, each step heavier than the last. The girl was right behind me, her small body struggling to keep up with the pace, but she didn't complain. I kept glancing over my shoulder, knowing that every second counted. We had to make it to the cabin, but even as I heard the crunching of tires on the snow in the distance, I knew that we were running out of time. The engines were getting closer, the sound of motorcycles cutting through the night like a warning. I pushed harder, my muscles burning as I led the girl through the thickening snow. The trees around us seemed to close in, the branches heavy with the weight of the storm, and I could barely make out the shape of the cabin ahead. I prayed it would be enough. We were close now, but so were they. I could feel my heartbeat racing in my chest as I pushed through the last few yards of snow, reaching the cabin just as the engines roared to life behind us. We ran up to the door, and I slammed my shoulder against it, forcing it open just enough for us to slip inside. The girl stumbled in behind me, and I slammed the door shut with a heavy thud, locking it quickly. We were safe for the moment. I turned around, breathing heavily, my mind still spinning with adrenaline. The girl was standing by the small, dusty fireplace, looking at me with wide eyes, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. I knew she was terrified. I was too. I moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains just enough to peer outside. I could see the lights of the motorcycles now, the riders approaching fast, their figures cutting through the falling snow. I had no illusions. They wouldn't stop. They were coming for us, and they wouldn't stop until they had her. My mind raced, calculating our options. There was no way we could outrun them. The cabin was isolated, and the snowstorm made it nearly impossible to drive anywhere. We had to face them, but I had no idea what that would mean. I looked over at the girl, who was still standing in the corner, her hands pressed tightly together. "Stay close," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We're not out of this yet." She nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she was holding her breath, waiting for whatever would come next. I moved quickly to the back of the cabin, searching for anything we could use to defend ourselves. The place was abandoned, like most of the cabins in this area, but it had the basics, some tools, an old stove, a few boxes of supplies. I grabbed a crowbar and a knife from the shelf, slipping them into my jacket. We couldn't afford to be unarmed. I knew the men outside would be armed, too. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder, and I could hear the distant voices calling out to each other, their commands sharp in the night air. They were closing in on us. I turned to the girl, my voice low. "When I say go, you run to the back. I'll keep them distracted. You get to the woods, understand?" She didn't speak, but I saw her nod slightly, her eyes brimming with tears. She was scared, I could see it, but she was determined. She had to be. I had no illusions about what would happen if they found us. There was no mercy in their eyes. I took a deep breath and moved toward the front door. I couldn't let them see us waiting. I opened the door just enough to peek outside, and I saw them, 3 men, all dressed in black leather, their faces obscured by helmets. They had surrounded the cabin. I stepped back, my hand gripping the crowbar, ready for whatever was coming next. I glanced over at the girl one last time. "Stay behind me, and don't make a sound." She nodded, her small form barely visible in the shadows. I could hear the men approaching the door now, their footsteps crunching in the snow. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. They were here. This was it. I took a deep breath and stepped into position, waiting for the door to open. When it did, I was ready. I had no choice but to fight, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The door burst open with a violent crash, and for a split second, everything froze. The cold wind howled through the gap in the door, and the men outside rushed in, their boots hitting the floor with the force of a storm. I gripped the crowbar tighter, ready for the fight that was about to unfold. The girl was still behind me, her small frame barely visible in the shadows, but I could feel her trembling against the back of my legs. I couldn't afford to think about that now. The men were in the cabin, and I had to protect her. "Where is she?" one of them shouted, his voice rough, like he'd been expecting this moment. He was the leader. I could tell by the way the others reacted to him. The others were scanning the room, their eyes darting around, searching for any sign of the girl. My grip on the crowbar tightened as I stepped forward, blocking the doorway. You won't get her, I said, my voice low but firm. Not without going through me. The leader laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. You think you're a hero, huh? You're just a fool. He pulled out a gun, the metal gleaming in the dim light. I knew what that meant. They had no intention of negotiating. They wanted her, and they would do whatever it took to get her. The gun pointed directly at me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going down without a fight. You'll have to kill me first, I said, my voice steady, despite the fear that gnawed at my insides. He sneered at me, taking a step closer. That's the plan, he said, his voice dripping with malice. Just then, I heard a sound, a small shuffle behind me. The girl. She was moving. Run, I yelled to her, but I knew it was too late. The man's eyes flicked to her for just a second, and that was enough. I lunged forward, swinging the crowbar with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with the man's arm, knocking the gun from his hand and sending it skittering across the floor. The others reacted instantly, pulling out their own weapons. But I was already moving, staying low to the ground, using the element of surprise to my advantage. I swung again, this time hitting another man in the chest, knocking him back. The others rushed toward me, but I wasn't slowing down. I was faster, more desperate. The girl was still behind me, and I couldn't let them take her. I heard the sound of footsteps moving quickly from the corner of my eye. The girl had found a way to escape. She was running for the door, but I couldn't let her go out there alone. I fought with everything I had left, swinging the crowbar and knocking down anyone who got too close. One man came at me from the side, but I was ready. I pivoted, grabbing him by the arm and throwing him into the wall with all my strength. The force of the hit made him collapse, and I turned just in time to see the girl, terrified but determined, running toward the door. I moved toward her, desperate to get to her before they did. Go, go, I shouted, pushing her toward the open door. She didn't hesitate this time. She sprinted out into the night, and I followed closely behind her. The men were recovering now, scrambling to get back on their feet, but we had the head start. The storm outside was fierce, but it was our only advantage. We pushed through the snow, my boots slipping against the icy ground, but I kept moving. I couldn't let up. Not now. The girl was ahead of me, her small form cutting through the snow with surprising speed. She was scared, but she was determined. I could see it in the way she moved. She wasn't going to stop, and neither was I. The sound of the motorcycles was still echoing in the distance, but we had to get to the road. That was our only chance. We pushed through the trees, the branches heavy with snow, making it difficult to see ahead. But I could feel the girl's presence beside me, and I kept my pace steady, knowing we couldn't stop. We had to make it to safety. Almost there, I urged, my voice gruff with exhaustion. Just a little further. I could hear the bikes growing closer, but we were almost at the clearing. The road was just beyond the next ridge. We could make it. I pushed through the thick snow, my legs burning with the effort. And then, just as I thought we were home free, I heard the sound of a gunshot. I froze, my heart in my throat. I turned around, but the girl was still running ahead of me, her silhouette barely visible in the swirling snow. Another shot rang out, but it missed. I moved faster, catching up to her, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her forward. Stay with me, I said through gritted teeth. We're almost there. We ran the final stretch, the wind howling in our ears, the sound of the motorcycles now right behind us. We reached the road, and I could see headlights in the distance. The headlights of a car. A figure stepped out, and I recognized him immediately. My old friend. He had come for us. Get in, he shouted, waving us over. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed the girl and pulled her toward the car, throwing open the door and pushing her inside. I climbed in after her, slamming the door shut just as the motorcycle skidded to a stop behind us. My old friend hit the gas, and the car shot forward, the tires squealing against the snow. We were on our way, and as I looked back at the men standing in the snow, I knew that they had lost. We had won. We were free.